How is it going, everybody? I figured I would take this opportunity to talk about For Honor's upcoming balance changes and the testing grounds that went live on Thursday. So here we are. For Honor is getting some combat changes, and the biggest one of those things is they're removing buffered attacks. Or rather, they're making all attacks delayed attacks. So it does remove a little bit of skill there, but it also makes it much easier to balance attacks because all attacks are always the same. The idea behind this is that it will improve offense and make the difference between a mid to high level player and a top level player more equal. Because as it stands, the mid to high level players, they're unable to react to certain things, but the top level players, those people can react to things still. The entire design behind this is to make this read-based for everybody rather than reaction-based for some, because overall, that makes for a healthier game. If you already can't react to things, this doesn't change anything. You're still not able to react to them. So let's go ahead and get into what exactly they are. These changes are changing the way that delayed attacks work, so that they are no longer a thing. Instead, all of your attacks will start 100 milliseconds into the animation, and your indicators for those attacks will be hidden for the first 100 milliseconds of the indicator. To compensate for that, they have moved all 400 millisecond attacks up to 500 milliseconds, outside of a few edge cases like Lawbringer's Toplight. So with this change, effectively nothing has changed for the people who were previously delaying their attacks at 400 milliseconds. So anyone doing that is now doing the same thing that they used to be, which means throwing out a 400 millisecond attack, even though the actual attack duration is 500 milliseconds. In theory, this should help improve latency. So if there's latency between the two of you as fighters, this 100 millisecond buffer of no indicator should be eaten into, rather than simply continuing to add latency. So in theory, if your latency between the two of you is less than 100 milliseconds, you will get an indicator missing for your latency taken off of 100 milliseconds and then shown the full duration of the attack. This requires a ton of testing to figure out where exactly those breakpoints are for latency, and I haven't done that testing, and I don't think anyone else has either yet. Being that it's just testing ground, I don't really want to put in all of the time that it takes to test something as intensive as netcode, but I do have a little bit of footage, so maybe I can take a look at that. So here we are. In theory, this is a way to reduce latency impact on the game so that more people have a normal, air quotes, experience. Whereas currently you have to be playing on your closest server to be having your normal experience, and even playing on your slightly out of region servers can give you a different experience. That's not very good. In theory, this change makes it so that those servers are the same and there's no longer an out of region server for you. This, of course, does not mean that you can now play from EU to NA with zero problems. It simply means that there will be no difference between the London server and the Frankfurt server, or the US West and the US East. And like I said, I haven't put a huge amount of effort into finding out if this is actually true. This is just what the developers have said, and they've said this should work, should help to smooth everything under 100 milliseconds, instead of the previous system, which smoothed everything under about 50. Then we have the balance portion of this. This does remove some skill ceiling here, which in my opinion is a good thing because the delayed mechanic never is explained to you. And in fact, at some points they've simply broken delays for different attacks and then reintroduced them because they're kind of not intentional. Or I guess since this is being made a permanent change, they are now intentional and the baseline. The developers did give us some small GIFs that were showcasing how these delayed attacks worked previously and how the new technology that we're getting in the testing grounds right now works. And overall, my experience with this in the couple dozen matches that I've played just in the testing grounds, I like these changes. It does indeed move the game away from reaction-based offense, which is sorely needed, because sitting there waiting for parries to give you some form of damage is not an engaging mechanic. It sucks. It results in staring contests. The new system works fairly well for everyone at every play level because the noobs still aren't reacting to stuff, as evidenced by me not reacting to stuff. And then the better players I've talked to, they're enjoying the changes because now the stuff that was sometimes reactable is now no longer reactable, which is the intention. Stuff like Orochi's offense in his rework was built around the fact that, like, people can't react to you all the time. But that doesn't make him a good character because some people can react to him. Especially now with the new changes, this also means that your neutral attacks can be delayed and are by default delayed, which is a huge change that will buff basically every hero in the game so that they can now initiate combat using their light attacks. This then promotes things like chain-based offense, like Orochi had in his rework, which is part of your offense is the fact that you can flip the chain side and your second attack is slightly faster. Same thing with, say, Valkyrie. Then as some additional pushes here, they're increasing the feint believability, so all feints, soft feints, and cancels are now more believable as they continue to keep their animations for an additional 100 milliseconds. I don't utilize feints a huge amount because, like I've commented multiple times now, kind of a noob, but the little bit that I have been using feints, they have been immensely more successful with the new changes. The ability to feint my attacks into, say, a kick or into a guard break, people are going for the parries more often simply because the animations continue to play. As far as I can tell, this doesn't result in flicker of the parry windows, so it is simply people trying to react parry based on their previous experience of when to throw out the parry. And as expected by Ubisoft, this style of play is being negated. As an additional change, they have changed how stamina consumption works. The stamina penalties for miss, block, and parries have been removed completely. This is a mixed bag in my experience. Some of these things seems like the penalties are a little needed, say for a parry, but at the same time, blocking and missing, those being gone, really neat. I like that change a lot. Then you have a damage reduction pretty much across the board for most heavies. The developers didn't do the greatest job on damage reduction here. They say that damage for attacks has been generally lowered. Some attacks and heroes have been adjusted more than others to give us more consistent values across the cast. I don't think this is true at all. It's not consistent whatsoever. In particular, you have stuff like Conqueror, who does a 12 damage light and a 14 damage heavy. That's, what? Those are two wildly different damage values for nothing. So, in particular with, like, Conqueror, these values are very much testing and not finalized. You also have stuff like Shaman's Bleed Dagger cancel. It's a 400 millisecond soft feint, and it deals 31 damage. It's definitely not something that needs to be staying in the game. It's not healthy. So there's a bunch of damage value tweaking in the testing grounds. I really hope that a lot of it doesn't make it to live. Some of it is very nice changes, like they've tweaked Hitokiri from 40 damage heavies to 29 damage heavies. It's a little bit of an improvement. Same thing with Warden. Warden is seeing some damage reduction on his crushing counter and on his side and top heavies. So there's definitely some positives in these damage changes. There's also some negatives, like I said, with Conqueror, Shaman, and even Gladiator, who has a 55 damage skewer. But overall, I'm really liking the fight changes. The focus on read-based combat is a very fun one, and it's really changed the way I play the game. And I think that's expected by Ubisoft, because reaction-based combat, even though I'm not the fastest, and even though I am a pretty big noob, like, their read-based combat is more fun and more engaging, and it results in being able to attack more often, and you don't feel as bad when you don't get a parry. Then as a final mention here, they are saying that the zone attack input is more comfortable in the testing grounds. Because of the fact that they've hidden the indicators for the first 100 milliseconds, there's now no longer the 66 millisecond flicker that happens, and that's a huge positive. That means that they can now relax the zone attack input back to the way it was, and in theory, this should be an improvement for anyone playing on a controller, as you will now no longer throw out your stunning tap the minute you try and throw out your zone, because for some reason the zone input is a stunning tap heavy cancel. Oh, you don't do that? Just me? Man, Raider sucks. So yeah, here we are. There's a little bit of news for you, a little bit of my opinion on the news and the experience I've had in testing grounds. Given that it's been the whole weekend now, have you played the testing grounds at all? What do you think of the changes? Do you think that they're helping or hurting the community overall? Is this a direction you want the game to be moving in, to read-based combat rather than reaction-based combat, so that you have to observe your opponent or simply take a good guess at what they're going to be doing? I'm especially curious about the console players out in the community here. If you've been playing the testing grounds at all, how do you feel about the changes? Has it made your game more fun or less fun? And then since you telling me doesn't actually do anything for the overall game, there's also a survey link down in the description that is from Ubisoft. If you want to give them your opinion, they'll actually listen to it and implement it into the game. So yeah, have at it. This one really ended up a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, so I do apologize for that. As always, thank you for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in the next one.